We brought you this story the other day. We talked about it with Mark Hemingway from RealClearInvestigations.com yesterday, and we're going to continue talking about it. It is, you want to talk about existential threat, that phrase that's thrown around a lot. It's sort of been rendered meaningless, but this is one. Talking about, of course, the work of Michael Shellenberger and Matt Taibbi primarily, first with the Twitter files, and now with the information they've got from a whistleblower about the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, which sounds like something out of a Marvel's comic book, but it's real. And this is, again, the censorship industrial complex. Federal government, deep state actors working indirectly and directly in some cases, as they did, as was exposed in the Twitter files, as they did with social media companies in advance of 2020. To make sure 2016 never happens again, meaning someone that is unacceptable to the political ruling class, following Brexit first and then Trump's election. And Shellenberger and Taibbi, modern-day Woodward and Bernstein, testified again before the Weaponization of Government Committee, chaired by Congressman Jim Jordan yesterday. And here's what Shellenberger had to say in repeating some of what we told you a couple of days ago, but this was when he first disclosed what he and Taibbi had been given by this whistleblower. So now he's summarizing it for members of Congress. So nobody can pretend that they didn't know. And now we're going to see how deeply House Republicans, because who else, is willing to investigate, and how courageous they are in terms of bringing people forward, and relentless they are in furtherance of complete exposure of what has been going on in the dark corners of the federal government.
9 months ago, I testified and provided evidence to the subcommittee about the existence of a censorship industrial complex, a network of government agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, government contractors, and big tech media platforms that conspired to censor ordinary Americans and elected officials alike for holding disfavored views. I regret to inform the subcommittee today that the scope, power, and law-breaking of the censorship industrial complex are even worse than we had realized back in March. 2 days ago, my colleagues and I published the first batch of internal files from the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, which show U.S. and U.K. military contractors working in 2019 and 2020 to both censor and turn sophisticated psychological operations and disinformation tactics developed abroad against the American people. What's more, the whistleblower who delivered the CTIL files to us says that its leader, a quote-unquote former British intelligence analyst, was quote-unquote in the room at the Obama White House in 2017 when she received the instructions to create a counter-disinformation project to, quote, stop a repeat of 2016. In 2020, the Department of Homeland Security, CISA, violated the First Amendment and interfered in the election, while in 2021, CISA and the White House violated the First Amendment and undermined America's response to the COVID pandemic by demanding that Facebook and Twitter censor content that Facebook itself said was, quote-unquote, often true, including about vaccine side effects. All of this is profoundly un-American.
Profoundly un-American. And the election rigging is profoundly more serious in terms of trying to control information flow than any discussion about Zuckerboxes or Zuckerbucks or Dominion voting machines. I'll tell you that right now. Shellenberger also posed this question to Democrats who, run around saying that Trump is a threat to our democracy and ushers in the prospect of authoritarianism and so forth.
If the Democrats are very, very concerned about President Trump, I would ask them, if they're so concerned about President Trump, would you want him to control the censorship apparatus? Would you want that, given all the things that you've said? Would you like him to be able to call Twitter and Facebook and all these other platforms and demand that they censor content? Doesn't seem consistent to me.
And both Shellenberger and Taibbi are men of the left, as we've mentioned before. Shellenberger, environmental activist as well. Of course, the answer to Shellenberger's question, the real answer is, well, Mike, we don't need to worry about that. because the deep state won't work for Trump. They'll work for us, just like they did when he was president. That's what they think, I think. For more on all this, we're pleased to be joined by Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spiked Online. Brendan O'Neill, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, we're going to have some difficulty getting the D.C. press corps to pick this up. So Schellenberger and Taibbi and what some outlets like ours can do. But since this new Cyber Threat Intelligence League, includes, again, apparently former UK military folks, maybe you guys at Spiked can run with the ball as well.
Yeah, well, we've been writing about the rise of this new censorship industrial complex for some time. I've had a couple of conversations with Mike Schellenberger about it. He's doing some amazing work at the moment trying to raise awareness about this new system of thought control. And, what's happening in the US is particularly shocking, I think, because my understanding is that you guys have a First Amendment which forbids the government from interfering with the free speech of the citizens. And it seems that the government is finding a way around that by connecting with social media oligarchs and other agencies to basically get them to do the dirty work of censorship on the government's behalf. It's incredibly sneaky and deeply concerning. In Europe, it's a bit more open in terms of what is happening. We have this new piece of legislation in the European Union called the Digital Services Act, where huge social media companies have massive pressure put on them to take down problematic content. That could be actually illegal content, like a snuff movie or something, or it could be disinformation or content that might be harmful to young people. These are very subjective categories. And if these social media companies don't take the content down, they could face fines up to a value of 6% of their annual income. That is billions of dollars. So, of course, they will err on the side of caution and start taking down everything that potentially crosses a certain line. So censorship is running riot in the US and Europe at the moment, and I think we should take it very seriously.
Well, you saw what you're describing in Ireland in response to the violence over the weekend, in response to a violent mass stabbing attack that occurred. And the response from some Irish politicians was to excoriate Twitter or X for not taking down content that they wanted taken down related to the events that transpired when other social media platforms did. So here we go again. You fold in with the state, you do what we tell you to do, otherwise we're coming for you.
That's right. What's been happening in Ireland is very, very disturbing, and I think it's a sign of where the rest of Europe and potentially the rest of the world may soon go. So, as you say, there was this mass stabbing attack on the 23rd of November outside a school in Dublin. It was followed by a riot in the streets of Dublin, the worst riots they've had in Ireland in decades, because people are very ticked off with not being allowed to speak freely about mass immigration and some of the problems that it causes in Irish society. So they really kicked off and they went on O'Connell Street, a very famous street in Ireland, and burnt things down, etc. So a lot of instability in Ireland at the moment. And of course, the Irish government's response is not to listen to people's concerns, not to rethink its policies, which are increasingly unpopular, but to bring in tougher and tougher forms of censorship. So a hate speech law has been going through Irish Parliament for a while now, and they're now going to rush that through, bring it onto the statute books. This is a deeply Orwellian piece of legislation where you could potentially be arrested for saying something that any member of the public considers to be hateful or hurtful. I mean, it's an extraordinarily wide-ranging law that could see people fined and imprisoned for saying things that should not be illegal to say.
Actually, that's though. Well, actually, the state senator, the state senator was apparently one of the sponsors. In her speech we played the other day, she talked about anything that causes someone discomfort. That's quite a standard.
It's mind blowing. I mean, it's almost, you feel like we're in a nightmare and we're going to hopefully wake up soon. It's crazy. And they have protected category groups in Ireland, people who are protected from discrimination. So that's people in relation to their gender identity, their sexuality, their race, their religion, etc. These are protected groups in Ireland and also in the UK, which means that you are not allowed to discriminate in public bodies against these people. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But with the hate speech law, what is now being put forward is that if you say something or promote an idea or hold a view that any member of one of those protected groups considers to be hateful or hurtful or discomforting, then you could potentially be arrested. So it is really quite staggering. And what's happened since the 23rd of November, since the stabbing and the riot, is that we've had the Justice Minister in Ireland boasting about contacting the Irish police and also contacting social media companies and forcing them to take content down. So we've had a situation now where Irish police officers have been phoning Facebook in Ireland and Twitter and TikTok and all the rest of them and instructing them to take things down. This is the beginnings of a police state. And I think where Ireland goes, other European countries will follow.
So were they upset, the lawmakers, that the riots were being broadcast on social media to create a bigger crowd, or were they mad that it was showing the world what's really going on?
Their argument is that the riots wouldn't have happened unless there were people on social media stirring them up. I think that's incredibly simplistic. I think these riots were an inevitable consequence of not allowing people to speak openly about mass immigration in Ireland. Just to give your listeners a sense of what's happening in Ireland, the statistics are extraordinary. 1 in 5 people in the Irish Republic was born overseas. That's 20% of the population. To give you a sense of what that means, in America, in the great melting pot era of America in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, around 15 or 16% of people in America were born overseas. In Ireland now, a tiny country, not a very rich country, it's 20%. This is very unusual for Ireland. Ireland is a country of mass emigration. That's why you have people like me in London and loads of Irish Americans as well. It's not a country of mass immigration. This is a new development. It's making people feel uncomfortable. It's putting resources under strain. But anytime someone tries to speak about it in public, they are damned as a bigot. They are told to shut up. They are arrested by the police. So that riot was the fury of the cancelled. It was the fury of people who are not being listened to. And blaming it on social media, I think, is just ridiculous.
Henry Kissinger, of course, the famed diplomat who just passed away at the age of 100 this week, in an interview he gave shortly before his death, he had this to say about multiculturalism.
It was a grave mistake to let in so many people of totally different cultural and religious and concepts, because it creates a pressure group inside each country that does that.
And so we see that happening in the U.S. as well because of the lawlessness at our border. And the point here is not to be opposed to immigration. Certainly Henry Kissinger, who escaped Nazi Germany, wasn't. But there's a way to do this is the argument. Not to not do it at all. There's a way to do this, and this seems to be what the ruling class in the West refuses to engage upon.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm not against immigration either. My parents are immigrants. I grew up in an immigrant community, which was, Irish, Indian, African descended people as well in London, and it was a fine community. That's going back a few years. I think what's happening now across Europe, in fact, is that we've had mass immigration from different parts of the world, a lot from the Middle East, a lot from North Africa, at the same time as there is a complete crisis of confidence in European countries, which are increasingly unwilling to integrate people into their cultural values, into their political values, into their moral values. So you have a real problematic mix of mass immigration and a failure to integrate people. And that has created a ticking time bomb of social problems. In Sweden now, parties from both the left and the right are openly saying that we have failed to integrate the hundreds of thousands of people we brought in from the Middle East. In Ireland, people are recognizing it too. And, everyone heard about the stabbing in Dublin a couple of weeks ago. by a man of Algerian descent. But before that, a young school teacher in Tullamore in County Offaly was murdered by a man from Slovakia. That made global waves as well. And in Sligo last year, 2 gay men were murdered by a man from Iraq. One of those gay men was beheaded. He was decapitated. These stories are not even being told in the media. And it's difficult, I think, for people to comprehend how unusual those kinds of events are in a small country like Ireland, which is predominantly made up of tight-knit, mostly rural communities. You know, in London, in New York, in places like that, random acts of violence are not unknown. In Ireland, they are incredibly unusual. So people are now asking questions and asking whether the ideology of multiculturalism is actually inflaming tensions and violence in society.
Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Reporter at Spiked, Spiked Online. Brendan, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
I love giving jewelry as a gift. Hi, it's Mike Gallagher. I want to tell you that Roland's Jewelers is the perfect place for that magical holiday gift for someone you love. I'm always amazed by their 5-star Google reviews. I love that they're family owned. Hey, getting engaged? Well, Roland's Jewelers has a large selection of both mined and lab-grown diamonds at great prices. Choose from beautifully crafted engagement rings from designer Simon G. or Italian designer Roberto Coin, offering stunning diamond pendants and earrings. How about a Tag Heuer watch with cutting-edge technology? Listen, I've been a customer of Roland's Jewelers for a long time. You should too. They're so impressive. Their staff is expertly trained. I encourage you to visit Roland's Jewelers in downtown Libertyville or visit RolandsJewelers.com. That's ROLLANDS, RolandsJewelers.com. Roland's Jewelers, a family-owned jeweler you can trust this holiday, just like I do.
Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson here, and if you're a small business owner or you make the marketing or advertising decisions for a business, then this message is for you.
Our annual Food for the Poor campaign is underway, and this year we're helping to raise money for children and their families in Latin America and the Caribbean who are desperate for access to food.
Millions of people, including many children, are suffering during this season of economic decline, unemployment, and rising food prices.
Here's how you and your business can be part of the solution. Become a Food for the Poor business benefactor. Just make a $2,500 tax-deductible donation to Food for the Poor, and AM560 will give you 40 one-minute commercials to air here on AM560 The Answer between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. Monday through Friday at no additional cost to you.
It's the best deal in all of Chicago radio.
Just call Anjanette Natowski at 847-472-8951. Again, that's 847-472-8951, or go to 560theanswer.com/food for the poor.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned